You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
I never imagined I'd feel like a guest, no, worse, a stranger, at my own father-in-law's funeral. The church smelled like lilies and old varnish, the air thick with grief and something else I couldn't quite name. Unease, maybe? Or maybe it was just me, out of place in a suit that didn't fit right anymore, surrounded by people who didn't quite meet my eye. James Henley had always been a commanding presence. Stoic, intelligent, impossibly wealthy, and impossible to impress. For years, I thought I had earned his respect, maybe even his quiet approval. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words carried weight. The man could say more in a nod than others did in a monologue. When Lauren and I got married, he had shaken my hand, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Don't waste your time." That was it. No toast, no long speech. Just that. I used to think that meant he saw something in me, like he trusted I was good for her. Now, I wasn't so sure. I arrived at the funeral 20 minutes early, thinking I'd help with something, or at least be there when Lauren walked in. But she was already there, outside the chapel doors, standing on the stone steps like a photograph. The wind pulled at her long black coat. Her dark suit hugged her figure perfectly, everything sharp and clean. Her makeup was flawless, subtle, not a smudge out of place, like grief itself had been curated. But it wasn't her appearance that stopped me in my tracks. It was the man standing beside her. He wasn't family, I knew that much. I'd never seen him before. He was around our age, early 30s, maybe? Tall, with that polished, confident air that says, "I belong anywhere I stand." He leaned in close, saying something that made her laugh, not a full laugh, not out loud, but a quiet exhale and a tilt of the head that I hadn't seen from her in months. Something private passed between them. I stepped forward. "Lauren," I said, gently, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping animal. She turned, startled at first. Then something shifted behind her eyes. She blinked, almost like she was recalibrating. "Trevor," she said. Her voice was formal. Not cold, but detached. Measured. "You look," I began, not even knowing where I was going with it. "You look beautiful," felt wrong. "You look like you're holding something back," was closer to the truth. She didn't let me finish. "You can sit in the third row," she said, adjusting her cuff. "With the family friends." It landed like a punch in the stomach. No room beside her. No explanation. Just distance, surgical and intentional. I stood there for a beat too long. Her companion gave me the briefest glance and a nod. That was it. So I did as I was told. Inside the chapel, soft organ music filtered through the still air. The pews filled up quickly, faces familiar and unfamiliar, all of them dressed in black and looking appropriately solemn. I took my place in the third row, feeling like a forgotten supporting character in a play that used to be my life. Lauren sat up front, first pew, of course. She was his only child. I watched her from behind, studying the angle of her head, the way her shoulders rose and fell. The man from before sat beside her. Too close. His knee brushed hers once and she didn't move away. During the eulogy, he handed her a tissue before she even turned to ask. And that's when the buzzing happened. It was quiet. Just a single, muffled vibration on wood. Her phone, faced up, left on the bench beside her. I wasn't trying to snoop, I wasn't even leaning forward, but I couldn't unsee it. Just a glimpse of the message. A preview. "You looked stunning in black. Missed you last night." My throat tightened. I stared at the words like they were written in fire. Then, in one swift, fluid motion, Lauren picked up the phone and swiped the screen clean. No reaction. No gasp. No tension. She didn't even glance around. She just locked the phone, slid it into her purse, and refocused her gaze on the speaker at the podium. I waited for her to flinch. For something, anything, to betray a sense of discomfort. Instead, she turned slightly, looking over her shoulder as if sensing my eyes on her. Her expression was unreadable. Composed. She tilted her head, eyebrows raised. "Is something wrong?" she mouthed, silent but deliberate. I shook my head once, instinctively, even though my chest was tightening by the second. "No," I whispered. "Just, long day." She gave a tiny nod, then turned back around. I sat there for the rest of the service, not hearing a word. Everything that followed, the speeches, the hymns, the scripture, became white noise. All I could see was that message burned into my mind. All I could feel was the chasm growing between us. "Missed you last night." She told me she'd stayed late at her father's old house with the attorney. Sorting through papers. Grief, she'd said, had made her lose track of time. She came home after midnight, exhausted, her makeup washed off, claiming she needed to sleep alone. "Just for a few days," she whispered from the hallway. "It's too much." But someone missed her last night. Someone who saw her in black before I did. When the funeral ended, I waited for her outside the chapel doors, but she didn't come to me. She walked past with her arm gently hooked around the man's, whispering something in his ear. I heard him laugh soft like it wasn't meant for anyone else. And me? I stood frozen beside the stone railing, clutching the folded program like it was proof of something I couldn't name. Eventually, I left. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. Not in that moment. But the questions came anyway. In waves. And with them, the beginnings of a realization I'd been trying to ignore for months. Something had shifted between us. Something subtle, something dangerous. And that shift had a name, a face, and a phone number that buzzed at her side while we said goodbye to her father. I thought funerals brought people closer. That grief did something to remind you what mattered. But all I felt was that Lauren had never been further from me. And something told me she was just getting started. Grief is supposed to be heavy. It's supposed to slow you down, make you ache, hold you in a fog while you piece your world back together. And it did sort of. But for me, the fog wasn't about James Henley's death. It was about the message on Lauren's phone, the stranger beside her at the funeral, and the realization that I might have been living in a reality built on a lie. I tried to forget what I saw. For about a day. But it kept looping in my mind like a film reel with a scratch on it. You looked stunning in black. Missed you last night. I stopped sleeping well. I'd close my eyes and replay the way she turned her phone over so casually as if hiding a message like that required no effort. No guilt. No pause. If she was cheating and I hadn't said those words out loud yet, it didn't seem new. It seemed rehearsed. Like she knew how to bury a moment like that without a single tell. And suddenly memories I had once dismissed, brushed aside as coincidences or bad timing, were demanding a second look. The San Diego trip came first. 3 months before the funeral, Lauren had flown out for a networking summit. She was vague about the details, just said it was one of those leadership offsites her company did once a year. 3 nights. She packed light and fast. Said she didn't want me driving her to the airport. It's too early, babe, you'd hate it, so she called a car and left before sunrise. I remember waving at the door as it shut behind her, not realizing it would be the last time I'd feel at ease in our house. The morning after she left, I was doing the dishes when I happened to glance at the brochure sitting on the counter left behind in her rush. That's when I noticed the dates. The summit had ended the day before she even landed. I called her to ask. She laughed. Oh, it got extended for the execs. Some closed-door thing, last minute. She sounded believable and I wanted to believe her. So I let it go. But now? Now it gnawed at me. Same with the perfume. Lauren used to wear this light, citrusy scent, clean, fresh, casual. But around January, she switched to something new. Something bolder. Muskier. I asked about it once, thinking maybe it was a gift or a sample from the department store. She just smiled. It's called Paloma, she said. You don't like it? It's different. She kissed my cheek. Exactly. It didn't occur to me then, but looking back, it felt like she wasn't trying to be desirable to me. She was experimenting for someone else. Someone who preferred different. And then came the night of the towel. She had just come out of the shower, wrapped up with her wet hair tied in a bun. I walked past her to grab something from the closet and paused. What's that smell? She sniffed the towel. Oh, it's probably the hotel. They use those scented laundry things. Fancy eucalyptus or whatever. Hotel? You stayed at a hotel last night? Yeah, she said quickly, rubbing her hair dry. The offsite ended late and I didn't want to drive. I told you, remember? No, she hadn't. At the time, it seemed like another harmless white lie. She traveled a lot for work. Sometimes she crashed in hotels even when she didn't have to. It was her way of decompressing. I told myself not to be one of those husbands, the insecure kind who reads into everything. But now, I wish I had been. The next red flag came from her phone habits. She used to be the type to toss her phone on the couch and forget about it for hours. But lately, she guarded it like a hawk. Even in the bathroom. I remember one evening we were watching a movie and she got a call. She paused the film, said it was her project manager, and carried her phone into the guest bathroom with the fan on. 15 minutes passed. 20. The movie sat frozen. When she came back, her eyes were glassy, like she'd cried, or like she just played a different role entirely. I asked her once, "Everything okay?" She nodded without looking at me. Just work stuff. Exhausting. But it wasn't just exhaustion. It was disconnection. Emotional jet lag, like she was traveling between 2 lives and forgetting which one she was in. And then there was her fitness coach. Look, I'm not the jealous type. I don't panic when Lauren talks to other men. But this guy, He started showing up in her social feed out of nowhere. First, it was group class selfies. Then videos of her lifting weights while he corrected her form. Hands on her hips. His voice just audible enough to sound in *mate. Coach Ryan. His username read. I remember it now because I searched it again after the funeral. He was at the funeral. I spotted him during the reception, standing by the refreshment table in a black blazer and tight slacks, looking too tan and too relaxed for someone mourning a loss. He nodded at me once, the way a guy does when he's not sure how much you know. And Lauren? She hugged him. Not a grieving hug. Not a thank you for being here kind of hug. A long, close, silent kind of hug. Afterwards, I asked her who he was. Just my trainer. He came to pay respects. He met Dad a few times. Really? I asked. You never mentioned that. She blinked slowly. Maybe I forgot. And that's when the alarms really started blaring. You don't forget who your trainer meets. Especially not your father. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at her as she scrolled through her phone. A soft glow lighting her face. She didn't notice me watching. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. She smiled once. Just a flicker. Then tapped the screen, typed something, and turned it over again. Screen down. My heart beat louder than the ceiling fan. The thing about betrayal is you don't always see it right away. Sometimes, it hides in plain sight. In the towel that smells like another man. In the perfume she wears when you're not around. In the calls taken behind locked doors. But now, those little moments weren't fragments. They were pieces of something whole. A story she'd been writing quietly while I slept beside her, trusting. And suddenly, I wasn't just grieving James Henley. I was grieving a version of my marriage that maybe never even existed. 2 days after the funeral, Lauren came home late. Again. She had texted me around 6:30. Meeting with the estate attorney ran long. I'll be home later. Don't wait up. That was it. No apology, no detail. Just a notice like a colleague canceling a meeting. When she walked through the door at nearly 10, she looked composed. Not tired, not drained. Not like someone who'd spent hours talking about wills and probate and bank accounts. Her coat was buttoned up, her makeup still intact. There was a faint scent on her, subtle but foreign. Not her usual Paloma perfume. This one was warmer, deeper, masculine. Hey, she said, setting her bag on the hallway bench. Sorry it ran long. I nodded from the couch. It's fine. Everything okay? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just a lot of legal language. We're sorting through some of Dad's trusts. You know how it is. I didn't know. I wasn't invited to the meetings. I was the husband, yes, but apparently not a stakeholder. She brushed past me and disappeared into the bedroom, offering no more explanation. I sat there, still. Every inch of me was buzzing. There was something in the air, something unspoken that had weight. And I couldn't let it pass this time. I waited until the water began running in the bathroom. Then, slowly, I stood up and walked to where she'd left her bag. It was a sleek leather tote she only used when she wanted to project authority at work, at conferences, or apparently with estate lawyers. I told myself I wasn't going to snoop. I told myself I was just checking. But my hand reached for the zipper before I could stop it. Inside, beneath a legal pad and 2 capped pens, was a document folder. Heavy cardstock. The kind law firms use when they're handling money. I opened it. Right at the top, stamped in bold. Property Division Agreement, Preliminary Draft. And then I saw the names. Lauren Henley, Sean Lawrence. I froze. The breath caught in my throat like I'd swallowed a rock. My eyes scanned the rest of the page. It was formatted like any other legal document, but its contents hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. It detailed joint investments, equity in a property in Austin, future sale of a shared apartment, terms of asset separation, should either party pursue independent settlement. All dry language, but behind it was something explosive. Not just proof of another man, but evidence that Lauren had planned to leave me. And the date? 3 weeks before her father died. This wasn't a post-grief impulse. It wasn't trauma or confusion. It was premeditated. She drafted plans to divide her future without me, while her father was still breathing. The folder slipped from my hand and landed softly on the bench. I stared at it like it might evaporate. Sean Lawrence. That name kept ringing in my ears. I couldn't place the face, but I had seen it somewhere. Maybe not directly, but somewhere in Lauren's orbit. An email signature? A tagged photo? The funeral? Was it the man from the church steps? The one she whispered with before I arrived? The one who gave her that private smile? The one who stood too close, whose hand lingered too long? I clenched my jaw and closed the folder, slipping it back exactly where I found it. I didn't know what my next move was yet, but I knew I wasn't confronting her that night. Not like this. Not without a plan. Not when she could twist this into something you weren't supposed to see, or it's not what it looks like. No, I needed more. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. Left a note on the fridge, casually mentioning a brunch with a few people from Dad's charity board. No names. No specifics. I spent most of the day pacing, thinking, unraveling, trying to remember what I missed, what I let slide. I opened my laptop and did what I hadn't dared do before. I searched Sean Lawrence. He wasn't hard to find. A managing partner at a boutique investment firm. Lived in Austin. Single. Active on LinkedIn, less so on Instagram. His profile photo looked corporate, clean-cut, neatly dressed. Confident. Smug. I went deeper. Search after search. Articles he'd been quoted in. Photos from charity galas. One of them, dated 2 months ago, featured Lauren beside him at a financial summit in Dallas. She hadn't mentioned she attended. She hadn't mentioned Sean. She was smiling, her hand lightly resting on his arm. That night, I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't rationalize or excuse or wait for her to reveal it on her own timeline. When she came home, she was humming to herself. Happy. Lighter than she had been in weeks. It made my skin crawl. Hey, I said, stopping her in the kitchen. Who's Sean Lawrence? She paused, just for a beat. But it was enough. What? Sean Lawrence. You know him? Her mouth opened, then closed. She blinked slowly. He's an old friend. From school. Why? I didn't answer. I just looked at her. Hard. Her smile faltered. Why are you asking? I saw the draft, I said. The one in your bag. The property division agreement. Silence. I'd never seen her face go that pale that fast. You went through my things? You left it on the bench, I said flatly. You didn't even try to hide it. She didn't speak. Just stood there, arms limp at her sides. So, I continued, was this your plan? Leave me, shack up with him, cash out while your father was still alive? Her lip trembled, but not from sadness. It was calculation. You could almost hear the gears turning. It's not, she started. Don't. I cut her off. Don't say it's not what it looks like. Her eyes darted to the floor, then back to me. It was a draft. Just a conversation. I didn't sign anything. But you planned it, I said, voice rising. You wrote it. You dated it. And you put his name on it. A long pause. Then. It was complicated. That was the only defense she could muster. Complicated. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. The gall of it. The betrayal dressed up as a filing cabinet problem. I lost my father, she said suddenly. I was grieving. 3 weeks before he died? T-back. You were planning your exit before he even flatlined. She didn't deny it. She didn't even flinch. That night, she slept in the guest room without me asking. She didn't try to apologize. Didn't even come near me. And I didn't sleep. Not because I was hurt, though I was. But because the truth was no longer hidden. It had a name. A contract. A timestamp. This wasn't a hunch anymore. This was infidelity wrapped in a legal envelope sitting in a bag at my front door. The formal reading of James Henley's will took place on a Monday morning inside a quiet, wood-paneled office overlooking downtown. The kind of place that smelled like leather and ink and felt like time stopped at the door. Lauren insisted on driving separately. Optics, she said. I didn't ask what she meant. We were past pretending. By the time I arrived, she was already inside, sitting straight-backed at the long mahogany conference table, perfectly dressed in navy with her hair twisted into a soft bun. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes betrayed calculation, darting across the room like she was assessing risk. The man beside her wasn't Sean. He was older, one of the family's longtime attorneys, but the message was the same: distance, formality, control. There were about 10 of us in the room. A few extended family members, James's financial advisor, a representative from the Henley Foundation, and me. I didn't expect to be there. I figured I'd just sign a few papers later. I wasn't blood. But the invitation had come directly from the executor's office, with my name printed clearly on the envelope. When the attorney, a man named Clayton Walsh, entered the room, the mood shifted. Everyone straightened. Clayton was a gray-haired professional with a slow, deliberate way of speaking, like every sentence had been vetted by 100 courtrooms. "Thank you all for coming," he began, placing a thick folder on the table. "Today we will read the last will and testament of Mr. James Frederick Henley." The words hit the air like stone. Everyone knew what was coming, or thought they did. Lauren, being the only child, was expected to inherit the lion's share, if not all, of a fortune estimated to be around $300 million. Her father had built an empire out of commercial real estate and early tech investments. He had been notoriously private about his holdings, but everyone knew the number was massive. I sat at the far end of the table, silent, trying to ignore the pounding in my ears. I wasn't expecting anything. I was just there to witness whatever came next. Walsh began to read. The will was formal and precise, full of long legal phrases and contingencies. At first, it was standard stuff: donations to charities, scholarships through the Henley Foundation, retirement buyouts for long-term staff. Then he reached the section titled Direct Family Beneficiaries. Everyone leaned forward. Lauren's nails tapped once on the table. "Lauren Elizabeth Henley," Walsh read. "To my daughter, I leave the sum of $1 million to be held in trust and managed independently for a period of 10 years, with quarterly disbursements approved by the estate trustee." The room went still. I actually thought I misheard. I glanced at her, expecting confusion on her face. But her expression didn't crack yet. She stared ahead, blinking twice. "1 million, someone whispered behind me. Lauren finally spoke. Her voice was calm, almost clipped. "Excuse me. That must be a clerical error." Walsh cleared his throat. "There's no error." "What about the rest of the estate?" she asked, her jaw tightening. Walsh turned a page. "The remainder of Mr. Henley's assets, personal, corporate, and liquid, are to be transferred to one individual, Trevor Daniel Whitman." Every breath in the room vanished. Me. I stared at Walsh, convinced he'd said someone else. My mouth opened, but no words came out. My ears buzzed. My hands felt cold. Lauren turned to me slowly, eyes wide now, fury swelling just beneath her carefully maintained mask. "What?" she said sharply. I don't know," I muttered. "I didn't know anything about this." Walsh continued reading. "The estate includes all domestic and international real estate, corporate shares, private investments, and remaining trust funds. Estimated value at the time of death, $294. $6 million. I could hear people shifting in their chairs. No one looked at Lauren anymore. They looked at me, the man who walked in here with no title, no claim, no bloodline, and now had everything. "I'm sorry," she said, standing abruptly. "This is absurd. This must be invalid." "It's not," Walsh said. "Mr. Henley updated his will 6 weeks before his death. The documents were notarized, witnessed, and certified. His instructions were clear." "No," Lauren said, louder now. "He would never do this. He would never." "There's one more clause," Walsh interrupted, holding up a hand. "It pertains to Mr. Whitman's relationship to Ms. Henley." The room held its breath. Walsh flipped a final page. "If Mr. Whitman resumes any romantic, domestic, or legal partnership with Lauren Henley within a period of 18 months from the date of this reading, 45% of the estate, specifically identified as liquid assets and market holdings, shall be forfeited and redirected to the Henley Senior Foundation." The words dropped like bricks into the silence. That was the real twist. Not the inheritance, not the division, but the safeguard. He didn't just give me the fortune, he placed a trapdoor beneath it. It was written to prevent me from ever going back to her. For the first time since the funeral, Lauren lost her composure. Her hands trembled as she reached for the document. snatching it from the table. She scanned the final clause, her face draining of color. For a moment, I thought she might faint. Or scream. But she didn't. She just sat back down and stared straight ahead, her knuckles white. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. What was there to say? Walsh concluded the reading, thanked everyone for coming, and advised that the formal transfer process would begin within 30 days. The rest of the attendees began murmuring, some with sympathy, others with suspicion. I felt like I was in someone else's skin, like the room was tilting sideways. None of it felt real. Lauren stayed seated, frozen. Her attorney leaned in to speak, but she didn't respond. Her lips were pressed into a tight line. As I walked toward the door, I glanced back one last time. She was still staring at the will, still trying to process what her father had done. And in that moment I understood something. This wasn't about money. This was punishment. James Henley had known something. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to make sure his daughter couldn't manipulate her way back into power. Enough to place the final piece of the puzzle after he was gone. Enough to trust me, not just with his fortune but with his final message. He saw through her, long before I did. And now I had no illusions left. Lauren hadn't just betrayed me. She'd underestimated the one man who never did. In the days that followed the will reading, Lauren disappeared. Not literally. She was still in the city, still showing up to board meetings and charity events, still posting the occasional filtered photo of a skyline or a quote about resilience. But from my life, she vanished. No texts, no emails, no messages left at the door or guilt-laced voicemails. Just silence. At first, I thought maybe she'd accepted it, that her father's final blow had knocked the fight out of her. But I underestimated her capacity for reinvention, for calculation. The silence lasted exactly 5 days. Then it started. I was walking out of the building one morning, coffee in hand, tie loose around my neck, when I saw her across the street, standing beside a newspaper vendor like she was waiting for someone else. She was dressed in gray this time, modest, understated. No jewelry, no high heels, just a coat, flats, and a scarf twisted loosely around her neck. She looked harmless, almost forgettable, but her eyes locked on me like a laser. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just gave a nod, then turned and walked the other way. The message was clear. I'm still here. 2 days later, she showed up outside my office. I work in a high-rise downtown, private floor, badge access. You don't just show up unless you know someone, or unless you're determined. I walked into the lobby after lunch and found her sitting near the reception desk, legs crossed, holding a manila folder in her lap. She stood as soon as she saw me. "Trevor," she said softly, "do you have 5 minutes?" "I don't," I replied, brushing past her. "Please," she said. "It's not what you think." That line again. I didn't stop. But when I got to my desk later, the receptionist had left a message. "Your wife dropped off a folder. Didn't look like legal stuff." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside were 3 things. A hand-signed letter with the words "Proposal for Reconciliation" in the header. A revised estate division spreadsheet, neatly formatted and color-coded, showing a new 50-50 split she'd created in good faith. A photo from 3 years ago, on the coast, arms around each other, grinning in the wind. I stared at the photo the longest. I couldn't even remember what we were laughing about that day. She had written in tiny script on the back, "I don't want to lose this version of us." I shoved it all into a drawer and locked it. But that was just her opening move. Over the next week, Lauren began appearing in the most curated, deliberate ways imaginable. She bumped into me at my usual lunch spot. She walked past the coffee shop near my condo. She showed up at a gallery I visited maybe once a month, standing near a piece she knew I liked, acting surprised when she saw me. Each time she looked different, like she was trying on personas. One day chic and composed, the next meek and vulnerable. One day she talked about therapy, the next about memories. She was throwing darts at the wall, hoping one would land. And each time she handed me something, a revised contract, a note, A list of things I've learned. One time, a copy of her journal, flagged with pages about her doubt, her grief, her regret. The subtext was never subtle. She didn't want me. She wanted the clause lifted. She wanted access. She wanted leverage. At first, I ignored her. I said nothing, did nothing. I let her orbit me, hoping she'd wear herself out. But that's the thing about Lauren, she doesn't quit. She adapts. So when I didn't respond, she shifted tactics. She got soft. "Trevor," she said one afternoon, finding me on a bench outside the courthouse. "Do you really think my father understood what he was doing?" I turned my head slowly. "I think he understood more than I did." She sat beside me, uninvited. "He hated how I lived, how I handled the company. He hated my independence. This isn't justice. It's revenge." "You think this is about control?" I asked. "It's always been about control," she said bitterly. "And now he's using you to enforce it." I laughed quietly. "You're unbelievable." "Am I wrong?" she asked, voice calm now. "Do you really think I don't deserve anything? That I should spend the rest of my life scraping by while you, my husband, live off my family's legacy?" "You plan to leave me," I said flatly. "You signed documents with another man while your father was dying. You don't get to play victim now." Her eyes flashed. "You don't know everything." "No," I said, "but I know enough." She stood, adjusted her scarf. "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." She left without another word. But I knew she'd be back. A few nights later, I came home and found another envelope tucked beneath my door. No name, no return address. Inside was a printed email. From Lauren, to her father's estate attorney. Subject: clause revision request, confidential. The date was 2 weeks before James died. She had written, "I strongly urge you to reconsider the disqualifying clause related to Trevor. It's unnecessary, punitive, and based on an emotional misjudgment. My father's resentment toward my choices should not jeopardize my rightful position within the estate. I ask that it be removed or significantly softened in any revision to the will prior to finalization." The reply was short. "Mr. Henley declined your request. His instructions are final." I stared at it, heart pounding. She tried to erase the clause. Before he died, she'd fought it. She knew it would ruin her leverage. And he said no. That same night, I got a call from an old associate of James's. Someone from the foundation board. We talked for 20 minutes. Near the end, he said, James had his doubts about her. Not just about business. About other things. Things he didn't want to believe. "What kind of things?" I asked. There was a long pause. He mentioned once, just once, that after she visited, he started feeling strange. Chest tightness. Dizziness. He stopped taking the supplements she brought. Didn't trust them. The line went quiet. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called Walsh. "I need to see everything James left behind," I said. Letters, notes, anything he wrote before the will. It took a few days, but the legal team delivered a box to my door. Inside were sealed folders, backup documents, scanned files. And then, near the bottom, I found it. A handwritten note. Yellow paper. Faint ink. "If anything happens to me before this will is carried out, do not trust Lauren. She has motives. If I'm wrong, then this letter means nothing. But if I'm right, make sure the truth isn't buried with me." No signature. But it was his handwriting. I'd seen it on birthday cards. On sticky notes he left around the office. There was no doubt in my mind. James hadn't just suspected betrayal. He had predicted it. He had watched his daughter lie, manipulate, and maneuver, and he had written this letter as a final insurance policy. A whisper from the grave. And now it was mine.